Today we're looking at something that most of you will probably run into at some point and just pass it by thinking there is no real value there. Hey, Don here. Today we're going to look at something that I know a lot of people run into. It's something that people show me photos of quite often. Today we're going to talk about collar discs. Now, I know this may not seem like much. These are things you can find all over the place. Millions of these were made. Every, I think, flea market, antique store, antique mall, auction, estate sale I go to pretty much has these there. Most of them aren't worth a ton of money. But if you pay attention, delve into this area just a little tiny bit, you can find the diamonds in the rough, the ones that are worth $300, $400, and even $500 in some cases for some rare ones of these. Now, this is an earlier collar disc right here. This one's World War II or before, and a good way to tell is by looking at the back. This is one solid piece of brass, basically. It's a newer one because of the actual metal on this piece here, and I'll show you an example in just another minute here. Now, you can really see the difference if I compare it to a newer one. This is a thinly stamped out piece. It has different types of attachments on the back. This one has a disc that spins. You just put it on the back, onto the post, and it will spin all the way onto it, actually, just like that. Now, one confusion some people may run into is they may run into a big one like this and assume that it's for something weird like that as well. Now, this is a hat pin here. It is totally a different size. Don't confuse the two, even though you can see almost the same identical emblem on them. Now, most of these are fairly distinguishable. Obviously, I have a medical one here, and the next one is U.S. Army Air Force. These are typical of what you would find in World War II. So you just got to be on the lookout for these sorts of things. We're going to show you some in just a minute here that can sell for a ton of money, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And there's something that you can find out there. Most people, the majority of people who aren't heavy into this area, will not know what they have. They will just leave them there or sell these for 50 cents a dollar all of the time. Now, here's an engineer's and a quartermaster. The engineer's is right here with the castle basically on it, and then you have the quartermasters. So you would find these on the collar of a uniform, and that is hence why they are called collar discs. Collar discs are extremely collectible. There are tons of different variations and varieties of these as well. It's just like collecting anything else. Some of these are exceedingly rare and will sell upwards of $1,000. Now, one last thought on these. Just because the fronts all look the same doesn't mean they are the same, nor are they from the same time frame. Time frame, age, and construction means a ton on these. These are all actually different. And when you look at the back, you can clearly see the progression of them. This one right here is a solid disc. This one dates back to just before World War II. This one's a solid disc as well, but it has 2 pins instead of the spinner disc on here. This one is stamped out, really thin, later one as well. But the faces all look the same. That's the point. You've got to be able to distinguish the design construction on items, not just these, but pretty much anything out there. If you can tell the age by looking at them, you'll do far better than everybody else. So knowing the age is key and important because a World War I constructed disc will always be worth more than any of the other ones out there. It's the earliest example of these. Let's hop over and look at some right now and show you the sheer value in these sorts of things. Now, just like any other item, the majority of what you find out there will not be worth a fortune. That's how it works for anything out there. Anybody telling you different just doesn't know how this sort of thing works. This is a very unique subset of a Signal Corps one here. This one is for linemen, and you can clearly see the electrical poles and wires on this. It's a very specific, very rare one. Not many of these were made in World War I. Not many of these would have survived as well. So that's why this one here sold for $260. To just someone who doesn't know this type of thing, it looks just like any other one out there. That's the key. Most of the time I can pick these up for almost nothing because most people assume it's something very common and all over the place. Again, this is very specific. Now, many of these will be black in color from World War I. Do not clean that off. That is how they are supposed to be. Wasn't reflective on the field. So they are black intentionally. They did that before World War I as well. So highly collected, as you can see. Now, they also made these for many different organizations, not just the military. They made them for forestry. This one's from JROTC. This one's tied to New Orleans. Many of these are very specifically identifiable to a single solitary company in many cases. There's numbers, there's letters on many of these. They made them for almost any branch you could imagine that was around at the time. The more unique, the more limited the design, the more expensive it will be. This one sold for $130. Now, here's a fine example of a very identifiable one. This is from Puerto Rico, and this is the Scouts Company D. There are military records you can use to identify these online. Most of them won't cost you a dime. You can pretty much use the initials to determine where the location was. Obviously, if it was NY, it would be New York and such forth. MD, Maryland, and the whole work. So Puerto Rico here, very, very expensive, very scarce, very limited numbers of actual people would have been in the military from there to begin with at this time, this day and age. $195. Now, what you want, like with anything else, say an epaulet or something else, would be a matching pair. Now, this one's very unique because each eagle looks in a different direction. That is because they are mounted on either side of the collars. Hence, they would be in different directions, so they were both looking forward. Usually you only run into one. If you have a matching set, it can go for way more than what they would sell individually. Now here's another very interesting one, the 332nd Infantry Company A. They were in Italy in World War I, so this one can be very specifically tied to that group, to that regimental company in the whole works. These sorts are what you really want. Numbers and letters on them, crossed rifles for infantry, that's what those stand for. This one went for $161. Now, as I said earlier, the more unique, the more interesting the unit or what this went for, the more expensive they can be in many cases. This is the intelligence police from World War I. Now, those cases you see, you can easily order online as well. There are collectors of these. They actually mount in a display case. You can get button ones that are much smaller than this. You can get them for jewelry and all sorts of little things like that. That's where the actual case for this one comes from. $189 for this very scarce one. Now, many people might not even realize these are military or tied to military because some of the markings, the lettering, numbering on them may not match something that the average person would realize is a military designation. I found these in sewing boxes, mixed in with ladies' jewelry, bags of pins you would wear like on your jacket or on your hat, things like that. Many people do not understand what all of these are, where they went, or what they were used for. Now, this one's from the U.S. Forest Service. Just like I mentioned at the beginning, most government groups or agencies had some form of collar disc, at least in the World War I era. Some of the more desirable ones would be like Indian Service, Indian agents, and things like that. Very, very scarce ones. This one went for a pretty good penny at $130. Here's another one, Cross Rifles, Infantry. It's the 30th Regiment, Company D. You can type that information in on Google and find a heck of a lot of information to tie this group down, this regiment. You can figure out where they were, where they had service, where they saw action in the whole works. You can use that information in the title to garner more money out of your item. This one went for over $100. Here's another interesting one. This one sold for $66. Now, this is coastal artillery. The crossed cannons are artillery. The designation of the bullet in the center, that's kind of tied into the logo for coastal artillery. And this one's very specific with the AA for anti-aircraft. This is anti-aircraft Coastal Artillery Company B. That's what this one stands for. And again, you could tie that down to the very specific group of people who wore this. You could even get the actual names of people in this actual company from government records. That's why these are key, important. If you can read what's on them, you can do far better. But you don't necessarily even have to know what it says on these, because as long as you know it's a collar disc, it's something unique you haven't seen before, you can still get a lot of money, because the people who buy these these are ravenous. They want every rare or variant that they can get to complete their collection. Now here's another unique one. After they served in the military, they issued ones that would say Honorable Discharge. You could wear these on your regular uniform, or if you were in the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, or one of the auxiliary groups, you could wear them on your uniform for that as well. Hence, that's why these were released like that. These are fairly scarce. Most of these will go for 50 to 70 bucks or better. If you got matching pairs, maybe even better than that. Now here's another unique one for the armored corps. Now these would be tank drivers and things like that. Some of the tank ones can go for hundreds of dollars as well. There's many different versions of tanks, and if you don't know what the old tanks look like, you may not realize what you're looking at. Some of them show a front-on view, some show a side view. They do not look like the modern-day tank most people would think of. Now, as I said, you don't even need to know what the specific collar discs are. People will still buy them. Here's a nice little lot, a nice mixed lot of them. This person just grabbed from what looks like a very large assortment that they have and just threw 10 in a lot and got $100+ for them. Again, these can be bought in mass quantity as well at shows sometimes, or at antique fairs, festivals, flea markets, or auctions. Now here's a collection that someone has put together. They've got a nice case for it. They each have their own small cups for them, containers. Very nice assortment here, as you can see. Nice lot of infantry and artillery on the bottom. This went for over 260 bucks, plus a good amount for shipping as well. Very highly collectible. Most of these you won't have to pay very much for if you find them loose, not from a collection. And I do find them all over the place. I've found many of these at savers and thrift stores up at the front or mixed in with jewelry all the time. And here's just one last example to show you something different and unique. Now, just like buttons, they had hidden compartments in them. Sometimes there would be a compass or something like that, hidden directions. This one has a faded photo in it. Probably their loved one, their wife, or whatever the case may be. These are highly collected, and many people will miss these because it looks very similar to any other one out there on the market. And this one went for 115 bucks. Very scarce. Many people will have these in their possession and not even realize that they open up. They're missing a big, huge chunk of the actual value on these sorts of things. Well, there we have it. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Know how I save money? With unsweetened Kool-Aid and sugar, just like my mom did. I remember how she'd mix a big pitcher full. Kool-Aid was so good and so inexpensive. It's still as delicious as ever. Today, with my sugar, it's about 12 cents a quart. Has vitamin C, too. I like giving Kathy what my mom gave me.
Kool-Aid brand soft drink mix and your sugar. You loved it as a kid, you trust it as a mother.